Hello everyone and welcome to this review for Warlock for Rise of the Shadows. We're going to be rating cards on a 1 to 5 scale. You can find the details on the scale in the description below if you haven't been watching the other videos, or you can go back to the neutrals video where we spoke about the scale quite a bit. Basically, 1 is trash, 5 is meta defining, and the other ratings are something in between. We also have the option to kind of look at a card as a tech card only for specialist, where we will actually just specify that it's a tech card and might not even give it a rating on our 1 to 5 scale. So let's get started here with the Warlock. And we have the arch villain of this set. We have Arch-Villain Rafam. Arch-Villain Rafam is a 7-mana 7/8 legendary taunt minion with Battle Cry. Replace your hand and deck with legendary minions. So my first thoughts about Arch-Villain Rafam, I'm going to have to remember not to call him Arch-Thief Rafam, as he's got an upgraded title now. Arch-Villain Rafam, obviously is a throwback to the Golden Monkey that we saw from League of Explorers set, where it had the similar battle cry effect. It was also a well-statted taunt for its cost. Obviously, there was quite a different way that we got there. But giving the legendary minion effect is usually not something that is particularly exciting to me. I think on average, legendary minions are not necessarily that good. Maybe they're a little bit better in this set. I haven't really done a proper analysis as to the average for legendary minions. I think that these days a lot of them are class cards as well, which makes them a little bit better, because class cards generally tend to be better than neutrals. So neutral legendaries on average probably often weaker. The biggest issue is like a lot of the classic legendaries are just garbage. And when you draw like a Millhouse Manastorm or a Lorwaka Cho, you feel really bad, and that's an issue. But Arch-Thief Rafam, once I looked further, I realized, this is a 7-mana 7/8 with taunt we're playing. Yes, the effect is not necessarily something we want to get on curve on turn 7, but I think that Arch-Villain Rafam is very powerful by himself. On the board, his impact is very high, and I think that really helps. So I think overall, Arch-Villain Rafam is going to get a 4 from me. I think it's a card we could see in multiple decks, both as a value card in the late game to kind of throw away all your pointless removal that you don't need in a control mirror. It could also even be something that we see in Zoo, maybe more as a tech card and specialist, as kind of the top end. 7 mana is a reasonable top end for Zoo, or for a Zoo type deck. And in those kind of decks, you can really do with replacing all your bad 1-cost minions late in the game with rather just random legendaries. That's probably going to be an improvement. So I think Arch-Villain Rafam might actually see play in a couple decks, and I do really like him and the design for Arch-Villain Rafam. Next up, we have Fell Lord Betrug. Fell Lord Betrug is a 8-mana 5/7 demon. It's a legendary, and it reads, whenever you draw a minion, summon a copy of it with Rush that dies at the end of turn. So obviously this would be very good with some Death Rattle effects, but the problem with this kind of effect is that it's based on when you draw a minion, and the issue with that is that you can't really control that. You have no predictability in what you're going to draw. Yes, you could shuffle a minion back in with Baleful Banker that's on the board, but that's not necessarily going to help you much. I think Fell Lord Betrug by himself looks pretty bad. I think that Plot Twist, the card we're going to see coming up in Warlock, is a card that facilitates Fell Lord Betrug enough that maybe he sees play. But I think at best, Fell Lord Betrug himself is just a 2. It's going to see Fringe play at a lot of the time. I think it's really just going to be a 1. If Plot Twist didn't exist, this would probably just be a 1. Next up, we have Jumbo Imp. Jumbo Imp is a 10-mana 8/8 demon. It's an epic, and it costs 1 less whenever a friendly demon dies while this is in your hand. So the obvious comparisons here are to the Giant cards, Sea Giant and Mountain Giant and Molten Giant, those kind of cards. And then the other obvious comparison is to Corridor Creeper. So it's got a similar reduction effect as Corridor Creeper, but starting at 10 mana is a huge difference. And this is only activated when a friendly demon dies. So you have to bear in mind that means only friendly minions, and it means only demons. And those are two big differences to Corridor Creeper. Corridor Creeper, the beauty of it was you could keep trading evenly with your opponent and then play it for a massive tempo advantage. It's very difficult to just trade evenly with all your demons the whole time with Jumbo Imp. I mean, the only real way you're going to get Jumbo Imp to be cheaper is the scheme, and I don't really think the scheme is particularly good, so I think Jumbo Imp is going to be pretty garbage. I think Jumbo Imp is probably just a 1, to be honest. I don't really see us being able to play enough demons right now that Jumbo Imp is viable. We would need a couple more implosion kind of cards in order for Jumbo Imp to even be something we consider, and even then, like, demons are just not dying that early. Next up, we have Darkest Hour. Darkest Hour is a 6-mana epic spell. It reads, destroy all friendly minions. For each one, summon a random minion from your deck. So this card is actually kind of difficult to judge. The idea is, the first thought is like, if I'm destroying a bunch of minions on the board and summoning new ones, aren't I just summoning minions from my deck that are like at a relatively equivalent power to the minions on my board? Because that's how I've had to balance my deck during the building stage. But then you can consider that with the scheme and some other cards, you can generate a bunch of tokens and that means you can have a net gain effect on Darkest Hour. And that's the interesting part. You know, Darkest Hour could actually be a very, very powerful board flooding tool for Warlocks. It does come at a very big cost, but maybe it's all right enough that it actually could see some play. I think this is a very, very weird card. I think this is a card that really pushes a deck. But at the same time, I think that deck might not necessarily be that good. So I'm going to give it a 3. But I think this is a very 3 with the question mark next to it type of rating, because Darkest Hour could have a lot of potential to do a lot of shenanigans. Next up, we have Inferno. Inferno is a 3-mana rare spell. Give your demons +1 attack. Deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. So, dealing 1 damage to all enemy minions for 3 is alright for Warlock, frankly. It's not something I'm going to get too excited about. Giving all your minions +1 attack would be good, but this is only your demons. This is only giving your demons +1 attack. And this kind of falls into the same issue that Jumbo Imp does, right? I think this card is arguably more powerful and more easy to get off than Jumbo Imp. But I think that the issue here is that it's not that easy to get a board full of demons and have lots of demons dying. Not dying, but lots of demons on the board for you to buff. I mean, the big things we want to mention are like the Henge Clan Hag that summons the Amalgams, the scheme that we're going to see that summons the Imps. And I mean, those are like the main things we want to do. Giving +1 attack to a couple of our minions in Zoo is very powerful. But we're going to have to see whether we can really make a demon-heavy Zoo deck work. And right now, I'm not convinced there's enough demons to really make it work. If you can make a demon-heavy Zoo deck work, then Inferno is a very good card. It helps you trade up with all your minions. Or if they are in a type of mirror match, it would be absolutely insane because you would actually get to kill off a lot of their minions. So I think Inferno is going to be a 3. I think that it's not a card that... Actually, I think I'm just going to give it a 2. I think the card is quite powerful, but I'm not sure that there's enough demons to make the effect worthwhile. Next up, we have Eager Underling. Eager Underling is a 4-mana 2/2 rare minion with Death Rattle. Give 2 random friendly minions +2/+2. So I've seen some compare this to something like Fungomancer, but I think that's very way off. Because Fungomancer was a battle cry. Fungomancer therefore didn't have to die, so it was an extra body on the board. You paid 1 extra more mana for the immediate effect and the extra 2/2 stats, which is entirely more reasonable. Plus, you could control Fungomancer. If you had 4 minions on the board, you knew exactly where your Fungomancer was going to go. With Eager Underling, you have no idea, and that's a big issue. So I think Eager Underling is kind of meant to be sacrifice fodder for the the Sacrifice Grim Rally type Zoo deck, which might be a thing. But I think that Egon Ling is pretty garbage. I don't think it's good enough to play in that deck. So I think Egon Ling is a 1. Next up, we have Plot Twist. Plot Twist is a 2-mana rare spell. Shuffle your hand into your deck. Draw that many cards. Whew. Plot Twist is quite interesting. There's a lot of shenanigans that you can do with this card. There's some talk of some Mechathune combos that work really weirdly, but I don't want to go into those. There's the Fell Lord Betrug stuff. There's the idea that if this was Q block and we got to play Plot Twist, we'd be pretty happy, because once our hand becomes a little bit awkward, we can just play 2 mana to redraw our hand. And yes, we get 1 card less because we lose the Plot Twist when we play it, but I think that's still a pretty reasonable effect. So I think Plot Twist has a decent amount of viability. I don't think it's going to push a deck unless it's a very specific combo deck, in which case fine, Plot Twist would be a 4 in that scenario. I don't think that if there is that combo deck that it's going to be good enough to be meta defining, so Plot Twist isn't going to be a 5. I don't think the card's trash at all. I think Fringe might be where it ends up, but I'm going to give it a 3 because I think that there's enough flexibility in how you can use Plot Twist that it is actually pretty good. Next up, we have our NSE Broodmother. Our NSE Broodmother is a 6-mana 4/6 demon. It has Taunt, it's a common, and when you draw this, you restore 4 health to your hero. 6-mana 4/6 Taunt, no thank you. Demon, fine, it's a demon for the demon synergy stuff, but it's an expensive demon, so it's not exactly contributing to something like Jumbo Imp well, and it's not really benefiting that well from Inferno. So the demon tag is fairly irrelevant then. The Taunt bit is nice. The drawing 4 health, like getting 4 health for 0 mana is nice, except for the fact that you can't control this. It might not be the time you want to gain 4 health. And whilst it's nice to get it for free, I just don't think that putting a 6-mana 4/6 in our deck is worth that. So I think I'm going to give NSE Broodmother a 1. Next up, we have Reform Scheme. Reform Scheme is a 3-mana spell. Summon 1/1/1 imp, upgrades each turn. So after 2 turns of having this in your hand, you'll get 2 1/1 imps, 3 turns, 3 1/1 imps, and so on, so on. And I think that's really where it's important. You need to have this in your hand for 3 turns. So we're talking you need to have this in your hand from the mulligan. Or if you're like a zoo deck, maybe you can hold this and it's like the one card in your hand that is clunkier to play in the kind of way that Doomguard used to be. But it's very difficult for zoo type decks to put in a bunch of cards that are situational in the way you want to play them. I think it could be good in sideboards for zoo type decks where you want to have this as a board flooding generation tool that you can hold on to and be a little bit more cautious with your resources to play around AoE and board clear effects. Then I also think that another consideration is that I've heard some people mention like handlock as a thing, because in handlock you're more likely to get your schemes earlier because you tap for them more, which means that they're going to upgrade faster, obviously. Another consideration is that you've got options to go tall on the board with Mountain Giant, and Reform Scheme gives you a different option to go wide instead. So I think Reform Scheme could be interesting from that scenario. I think I'm going to give it a 2 though. I think at best it's fringe playable, tech card in some scenarios, but I do really like it. And I wouldn't be too sad to see it seeing play, although realistically we're talking like, turn 5, turn 6 as a play on the earliest most of the time. And then you can combo with something like Grim Rally. I mean, if we play this on if we get 5 of these and pay and Grim Rally, so 4 mana to get 4 2/2s is not really something I would do in Zoo though. So you need to be getting a lot of value from Reform Scheme for it to be really good in those decks. And I think at best it's going to be a fringe card. At best, I'm probably being a little bit too kind here. And then I think lastly we have Evil Genius. Evil Genius is a 2-mana 2/2 common minion with Death Rattle. With Battle Cry. Add a friendly minion to your hand. Add a friendly minion to your Okay. I am reading this entirely badly here. Evil Genius is a 2-mana 2/2 common minion with Battle Cry. Destroy a friendly minion to add 2 random lackeys to your hand. There we go. So, I think this might be the best lackey generation card. Apologies here. We've changed cards all of a sudden. I think that the ability to add lackeys to your hand is very good in a lot of the zoo decks. This, in the Grim Rally type deck, is another way to sacrifice your minions, which is relevant because you're probably going to have a lot of fodder in that deck. Obviously, with Prince Keleseth rotating out, we're actually going to consider 2-drops again. And I think lackeys are very strong 1-drops to get as well, which is exactly what Zoo wants. So I think Evil Genius is probably a 4 for me. I think that it's even good enough to help push Zoo. I think it's probably the best Zoo card in this set as well. So I think that Evil Genius is a fairly solid card, and I really like... it's another different, interesting payoff for, sacrificing your minions and your tempo on the board. And I think Zoo, where they kind of sometimes play like Scarab Eggs in the current kind of Grim Rally decks, might be able to get away with the Evil Genius. So I think it's a very good fit for Warlock. So overall, Warlock's in a position where it's looking like it's mostly going to be Zoo. I'm interested to see how these handlock archetypes pan out, especially with the silence stuff. Back in the old days when handlock used to actually play Ancient Watcher and silence cards, that was actually quite interesting. Now we could see it going back into that kind of a build with the Control Warlock and the Arcane Watcher. With the 2-mana silence dude and Ancient Watcher, you've got a lot more options to be more defensive on the board early on, and then you can protect your health total so that you can keep drawing cards against the aggro decks. So I think that those are the 2 main archetypes that interest me. We could see the return of Jaraxxus now that Gul'dan has rotated out, and I think that could be quite interesting as well, especially as a sideboard card in specialist format. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing people face Jaraxxus again, and not just Mecha Jaraxxus, the Warlock portrait. So overall, I think Warlock is actually in a fairly good position. I'm not sure how well its Zoo deck is going to match up against the other ones, but I think what's very important is that the Zoo deck is that Warlock has the life tap, right? And that makes a huge difference because it means even if your cards are not as good as your other opponent's Zoo cards, you can trade 1 for 1 and still win because you don't run out of cards as fast as they run out of cards. So I think overall, Warlock is looking fairly solid. If you have any feedback, feel free to drop a comment on the YouTube comments. Feel free to like and subscribe. That really helps out a lot, as well as sharing the videos. You can also find me on Twitch, where we're going to be streaming all of the Rise of the Shadows action once it goes live, and streaming most of the weekdays from now on once we can get back into the swing of things. And you can also find me on Twitter at @dib_gaming. And until we see you in the next and final video for Warrior, cheers.